Okay, we are recording. Hi everyone, thank you for coming. We have a few new faces I'm seeing now. So anyone here for the first time?
I am.
I am.
Hi, if you guys want to introduce yourselves
Sure.
before
Hi,
jumping.
my name is Brent Chelgren. I'm former employee of Medtronic. I had a 25-year career there as a R&D and CIO practitioner. And then right now I'm doing some management consulting for private equity.
Welcome, Brent. I think I heard one more name. Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Rich. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Rich Keeler. I'm VP of Software Engineering at Extra Space Storage. I've been a member with AIM for a couple of years, but this is my first time, I think, joining one of these calls.
Nice. Welcome, Rich.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I also just joined the call. Mark Pinson, VP of Engineering at Aptura. My first time joining one of these AI special focus calls from AIM.
Nice. Welcome. Okay. So let's start now. So a little bit about Chris. Actually, I've joined AIM maybe 3 years ago. Yeah. And every time I talk about technology, I feel super excited because here at AIM, we always learn something new. And Chris Weidemann is one of the few people here in Utah that knows almost everything about AI. So I'm a big fan of Chris. When I came from Brazil to US, the first company I started working was called Zact, and Chris was there. So that was my first job here in US was with Chris. So I'm very, very excited that you guys gonna listen from him. He's going to talk about how to apply AI successfully, lessons learned, and of course, we all are learning as we go, and things change every single day, and things get wrong every single day. We will all talk back about the MIT study that almost 90% of all AI projects they fail to bring ROI. So we all have lessons to learn here. So let's listen from Chris and make questions, make this a conversation instead of a presentation. And Chris, the mic is yours.
Appreciate it, Thiago. Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be back on a meeting with Thiago. He and I spent a lot of years together. But as Thiago referenced, I have been doing this for a while. It's funny, we have these kind of paths in life, and I don't think we actually fully understand them until we've lived them. But I got into what is now, generally just referenced as artificial intelligence back in 2012. And, machine learning modeling was more of what we called it at the time, but it's very much, the things that we're doing every day now. And I've led a pretty interesting career where I've been able to weave some of this stuff in and out of what we've been building for clients for a long time. Thiago and I actually started deploying some Gen AI late in 2018 or 2019 into some financial services here in the Valley. So even Gen AI, which feels like it's only a few years old, is something that we've had some great opportunities to build upon. And I was asked today to really come share some of the experience that we have and really talk about what is working. Thiago referenced that, 90% of those pilots are failing. What are the things that we can do to be successful? What is working? How do we, proceed with some type of understanding that we're going to be successful? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Just as an organization, we do help companies build these tools. We build custom models, software integrations, and we also have an arm where we're just helping people like yourselves that are already technical and understand how to use and build these things. We're here to kind of assist and provide advisory type services. Before we get too deep, I want to talk a little bit about what I call my origin story with artificial intelligence. This is 2010, 2011. We, as a family, traveled to Walt Disney World, which I'm sure everyone on the call, whether you've been there or not, you know what I'm talking about when I say Walt Disney World. It's a lot of people, a lot of lines, a lot of rides, a lot of fun things. But in early 2010, they had started to introduce this wristband that you would wear when you went into the park. And during our visit, and in that time, that was the first time that I had used one of those. And we put it on, and you're tapping as you're going in and out of your hotel room, or you're on a ride, or you want to buy something. There's all these opportunities to tap this wristband, and it kind of had me intrigued at the time. I was trying to understand, beyond just kind of ease of use, why this might be a thing. And after a little research, I found that Disney was actually doing something beyond just making it easy. They were providing a way for them to collect a lot of data, and they were collecting where everyone was in the park. So much so that they started building models sometime in 2010 on the movement of people through the park, and they were using the data off of the wristbands as the way of collecting that information. And the first time they did it, they only had kiosks and rides and door scans to really help them see that flow. But then quickly they started putting these RFID scanners all throughout the park so that as you were walking, even when you weren't intentionally scanning your wristband, you were still being scanned and they could see you make movements throughout the park. And so this idea of understanding the flow of people through the park then got someone's attention, and they wondered, can we use this same data to predict the movement of people? And ultimately, can we move people through the park intentionally based on our needs? And of course, they figured out a way to do that. They started building models, predictive models that allowed them to interpret as they move physical items in the park, how people would respond to those changes. If they put up a rope, or if they asked someone to stand there with a wand and point people in the right direction, or they put up a hot dog stand, they realized they really could direct the traffic of people inside of Disney World. So, of course, like any great business, they found a way to take advantage of this opportunity. And they started building predictions and models into how they could push people throughout the park into areas that were most beneficial to Disney World. So this really got me thinking about how these models, how predictive modeling and machine learning in general could really solve some of these unique challenges or unique opportunities that many businesses have. And so it was Disney that really got me thinking and pushed onto this path. And so this idea of Disney manipulating us through the park was what got me started with the first opportunity of deploying machine learning into the enterprise. So let's talk about what we're going to talk through today. I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about why I think AI is different than other technologies. I want to talk about the data that we know, kind of the information that we're getting back about some of the successes and failures. Then I want to move on to really the meat of why we're here, and that's what can we do to be successful? What is working, and what are the lessons learned that we have out of these many years of building at this point? And then at the end, if there's time and people have questions, I'm happy to ask or to answer questions. So let's talk about the transformation of AI. And I'm going to ask people to come off of their microphone here in a second because I'm going to ask a question and ask for your input. But if we look at transformation across technology, we see that it's all accelerating. And we all know this, right? There's Moore's law, there's many other laws that kind of explain this to us. But it's interesting to think about in some of these major transformations. Telephones, it took 50 years for us to go from 1 user to 50 million users. Computers, 14 years to get to 50 million. And then the internet, it only took 7 years. Does anyone know roughly how long it took ChatGPT to get to 50 million users? Anyone want to take a guess?
Wasn't it something
Okay.
absurd, like 3 months or something?
There's a guess of 3 months. Anyone else have another guess?
Thought it was a lot sooner. Thought it was like a week or something like that, something crazy.
Rob thinks a week. You guys are really close, right? And understandably, you guys are all very smart people. It took them 36 days. That's insanity. And they were over 100 million users in 2 months. So the speed of change is just unlike anything that we're really used to. And I think the transformational speed that we're all dealing with is what brings us into the conversation that we're having today of asking, why are these things so hard to implement? Why are we having such a hard time finding value? What can we do to get value? It's really about the speed that this is all coming at us. So you guys are right. They do hope that sometime probably passed by about now, they're going to reach 1 billion users. We probably would have heard about it if it had happened already, but it should be happening anytime soon here. Thiago mentioned this exact fact, and I think it's really important for us to think about as we're talking about these things today. We know that most companies that are building these tools are having a hard time finding significant value, that they can implement projects, that they can get some return, but this idea of building something that produces a truly significant value is really hard. And it's something that many businesses are struggling with. And, we ask our clients all the time, why or how, what's stopping you? What are the challenges you're facing? And you see some of those that we've experienced on the right there. But we're not really talking about what's going wrong or what's hard. We're going to talk today about instead what we can do to be successful. There are some other points that I think are worth kind of at least understanding and visualizing as we have this conversation today. There's some really interesting information about adoption that we know. We know that some departments are much better at adopting AI than others. We know there's segments and demographics of our employees that, when given tools, are going to find much more value than others. We also know that some employees are feeling very insecure about their jobs. We know that some people, specifically middle managers, actually feel pretty good about the situation they're in. They feel pretty safe. So there's all these emotions that come into play with this very fast, aggressively paced tool of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of value that we can extract. We know it's hard. But ultimately, at the end of the day, my offer to you is that we have seen success with these tools, that we do have great examples of how these tools can be deployed in a way that's presenting, as an example, this chart suggests that managers can save 7.2 hours a week. We have seen that. I have seen that example. I can share with you examples where people are saving that much time. So it's worth our time to go chase and find these opportunities within inside of the enterprise, but it does take some work on our end. So this isn't, we won't call this a lessons learned. This is something we all already know. This is me just really saying the thing that we already know out loud. And it's a very true statement. One of the things that many businesses struggle with right now is this idea of speed with implementing AI. A lot of businesses feel like they're way behind, that they are behind the curve and that their competitors are way past them. And I can tell you with confidence that's simply not true. That there are companies, there are people in your industry that I'm sure have found a lot of success with artificial intelligence, but the general population of businesses out there have not reached the potential that they're looking for. So we should slowly really think about this in first principles, find opportunities to really find single use cases where we can drive value and do the traditional crawl, walk, run. So don't get too excited. Don't try to push into that run phase. Listen to the logic in your brain and continue to push with what we all know is the right thing to do here. Starting with AI, you can really start in many ways, and I'm sure many of you are already here. I like to kind of introduce AI to many businesses with some of the great WYSIWYG tools that are already out there that are probably built into the enterprise stacks that you already use. Microsoft is a part of roughly 85% of all enterprises, so it's just a great example for us to use. But there are tools in these enterprise stacks that are a great starting point. Copilot Studio is the one that Microsoft offers. It's a great interface for technical and non-technical team members to go in and just effectively begin evaluating the opportunities that we have to leverage these tools. And like all stacks, there's a more and less technical version of these. As you have technical team members that kind of grow out of Copilot Studio, they can move into Azure AI Studio and begin expanding on the capabilities that are there. But this idea of crawl, walk, run should really start with just introducing tools that are valuable and that we can introduce the concepts of artificial intelligence to the general user base. Now, using these tools, these basic tools, we found that the entry is usually in one of these three areas. Finding repetitive tasks, these single use, I do this thing every day at 9 a.m. and every day of the week I do the same thing. These repetitive, reoccurring tasks are great starting points for these types of tools. Obviously, drafting and summarization, you all know that already. But then operations. There's this huge opportunity inside of operations to automate in a very safe way. And we can leverage these tools to kind of automate the flow of content, not only from these single use cases, but expanding across many repetitive tasks in a series. Now, what do these look like? They could be many different things. We've had the great opportunity of building many of these single use case tools. Many of them, are used every single day. But I think what's also becoming very interesting is we now have the opportunity, because of some of the tools that are out there, whether it be Claude Code or others, to build these single use, non-reoccurring apps for things that we maybe only need to do once or twice. The great example I like to use here on the right-hand side there, we went recently to an event and I needed a way of basically capturing the conversations that we had with the people that were there. And we can, we all have a CRM or a tool like that, but we didn't want to leverage some big bulky CRM tool. And instead, we just wanted a simple way of entering information about the people we were meeting. I needed to have the context of the actual conference that we were attending so that it could be very unique to what was going on. And within a few minutes, I was able to build something in one of these tools that we could use at this conference. We used it for 3 days, and then we'll never use it again. But because it only took, we'll call it 30 minutes to an hour to build, it has the value and it makes sense for us to use AI to build these types of tools, whether it's something we do day in, day out, or something that we just need a very specific use case for that produces a lot of value. I'm not going to go into all of these in detail because I think the value of what I'm here to talk about is really in the lessons learned. But I want you to see that there are opportunities across really a lot of, we'll call it operations, to implement these types of tools. We've had a lot of success building automation into project controls, project automation, staffing optimization. This is something that I've been surprised by, but a lot of organizations have found great need for basically optimizing the employees that they put onto different teams. The one great example here is actually for a large heavy civil construction company here in the Valley that's using a tool to basically produce the construction teams that go out and build. Same type of tool is being used in healthcare here in the Valley, where they have to define the teams that are going to go off and assist inside of operating rooms. They're using a tool just like that. Inside of bid and proposal, all these reoccurring tasks that many of us do, where we're trying to, work with our partners or new prospective clients, or maybe we're putting out RFIs. All of these pieces are these reoccurring tasks that we can build great tools with to manage and ultimately automate a lot of these things. Reconciling. All of our companies have to reconcile vendor invoices. We all have to pay bills. And a lot of these things are very risk prone. There's a lot of human element involved in these things, and these tools are very great at solving these types of problems. But let's get into what's truly, the value that I'm trying to extend to you here. So, if I've caught you, if you've kind of drifted off and you're thinking about something else, here's the time to come back. Here's where I'm going to give you the value of what I know to be true after the last 3 years of just exclusively focusing on helping companies implement AI. The number one lesson learned, the one thing I hope you walk away with today, is that the most important thing you can do is train and give your people access to these tools. Focus on them, allow them to be the ones that are driving the change. We'll talk about it here. I've got a few slides to help us think through this, but I say it there in the bottom. In my experience, a business user that's a subject matter expert, when given AI and trained in AI, will build things that are far more powerful for the business than a software engineer with AI. Plain and simple, they are far better at understanding the value and translating these tools into something that actually work. Of course, as companies become adept at changing and adding in AI into their workflows, you need these technical minds to help assist in these tools. But the faster that you can get your business up to speed, the business users up to speed with AI, the better. So here's what we say. We suggest that you truly invest in your people first. Make sure you have a way of training them. Train them beyond the tool that you're giving them. Don't just train them on Copilot. Don't just train them on ChatGPT. Help them understand why these tools work. Help them understand what AI is, the benefits, the risks, all of the pieces that they need to know to really be able to consume these tools in an advanced way. Help them understand those things. Don't really just expect that they'll be able to pick it up on their own. You have to be able to create an environment where you can teach and enable and allow them to ask questions and ultimately allow them to kind of iterate and grow their knowledge on their own. As you're doing this, of course, you want to provide this opportunity to all of your businesses, but my suggestion is always to really focus your efforts here on those individuals, whether they're individual contributors or middle management, that seem to have the most bottleneck, the ones that carry the most individual value within the business. Those are always the people that I suggest get this type of help first. That can be hard because those people tend to be the ones that are the busiest. They're the ones that effectively need more time in a day. But I can promise you, by giving them more of these tools and making them more literate with AI, you will give them the time back. Brent, I see a hand up. Why don't you go ahead and ask a question?
Yeah, just obviously a lot of the things out there are focused primarily on generative AI, and it's got the most notoriety with ChatGPT, et cetera. Do you have some other curriculum or tools in particular that we should help our organizations and stakeholders with beyond sort of the stuff that's getting the most notoriety, all the off-the-shelf stuff, other tools, other AI capabilities outside of Gen AI in order to prepare them for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, understanding machine learning in general is a great tool. However, I will say, especially when it comes to training people, I would suggest that you start on helping them understand the foundations of generative AI first, because it is the tool that's going to produce the most value immediately. And as they understand how Gen AI works, they can translate that same thought into traditional machine learning. So, for instance, if you take a normal business user today that doesn't really understand what generative AI is, and you send them down just a training course that explains the principles of generative AI, it's going to talk about how those models are predicting effectively words, and it's a predictive engine, and that's going to explain how machine learning works in general, how it's being trained to make predictions. And so as they learn what I think is probably the most valuable tool to them today of generative AI, they also start learning about these other things. Maybe to answer your question in a different way, I really don't think training people on a specific tool is a great idea. In the last 3 years, we have seen the tool of choice flip maybe 4 times. In the very beginning, everyone wanted ChatGPT. And then it slowly has flipped kind of back and forth to a few different tools. And now we're kind of seeing it flip yet again into the Claude space. And so even for the enterprise we're typically a little bit slower to change, we're still seeing a very rapid shift. So I think training these team members on the foundations and not on the tools themselves is really where you get some of that value. Brent, does that make sense?
Yep, that's helpful. Thanks.
Yep. All right. So who do you pick? How do you train these people? The basic simple what I would do here is, and I referenced it, is picking those high impact areas. Find the teams that if you could have more of their time, the business would excel because of X, Y, and Z. If you can take those teams and get them up to speed on, not only what these tools are and how to use them, and getting them to think creatively about how to use these tools, all of a sudden that idea of we can't find value unless we're part of that 10% goes away. Those team members will find value. They're all motivated to find more time in the day to do things in an easier way. And in our experience, just positioning those people in a situation where you've enabled them to have success is really the key. With the same thought, and this is another thing that we all know from change management, adoption is the hardest part. So as you're asking those team members to be involved, you're really overcoming some of those hurdles that we all have with adoption by contributing or having those team members contribute to the solution of the problem. Maybe the second biggest lessons learned that we have from building these tools is that we suggest once you've really informed your team members, once you've trained them, you should really start focusing on the back office. You have this instinct to want to go to something big. You want to go to the client side, because that's where you expect the value to be. But I can tell you after doing this for a long time now, that the lowest hanging fruit is always in the back office, meaning the items that you can get very quick return on investment for are going to be in the back office. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that you can be a little bit faster with those back office tasks. We have all seen the security risks that are out there because of AI. And as we're trying to implement these tools into a client-facing fashion, we do have to be a little more methodical in the way we're building tools. But as we're building stuff into the back office, it's not that we can't, or we shouldn't be security conscious. It's more so that the opportunities that are in the back office are simplistic. They're typically linear. There is a process already documented, and there are people that are all motivated to solve those problems. So I always suggest going into the back office first, asking the people what's the most frustrating thing in their day, what's the process, what's the business system, what is it that they wish they could change, and they'll list out opportunities for you. Whether they understand that those are AI opportunities or not, they will begin telling you the things that you can start implementing. So they're going to come back to you and they're going to say, we have this thing that we do every Tuesday and Thursday, and it takes me 4 extra hours because this thing always happens. And you're going to have light bulbs that come off, and as you have trained your employees to start leveraging these tools, they're going to see the opportunity as quickly as you can. So looking inside of the back office is always the best place. Again, we're going to target those bottlenecks. We're going to come in and we're going to ask the people where the friction is. Inside of this process that you do, where do you have the hardest time? Where do you constantly, wish that something was different? Look inside of quality and document processing and transactions, reporting, accounting, HR. All of these have great opportunities to leverage very simplistic automation where we add in intelligence and all of a sudden we have pretty extreme value. Now, we've all been hearing we need to clean our data for more than a decade now. I'm sure we can all go back 10 years plus and think of a time where, we maybe even told our teams that we needed to start cleaning our data. The great news is AI is really good at cleaning your data. Now, you still have to clean your data, right? This is not something we can't just skip, but we really suggest one of the first things that people do is look at the truly valuable data you have. So if we think back to Disney, think back to, pushing people through the park, taking that level of unique data and finding an opportunity to clean it using artificial intelligence prepares you for down the road when we finally have an opportunity to go invest in some of these more unique opportunities. AI is really, really good at highlighting where the garbage is. So as a team, as a technical team, if we were to sit down and say, okay, it's time to clean the data, we may know where to look. We may know what systems are dirty or messy, but we'd have a really hard time of just kind of quickly opening that data set and knowing exactly in that data set where the messiness is. But these tools are really, really good at that. Allow them to be the ones that kind of do these things that we've been putting off for a long time. All right, here's maybe when we start talking about, instead of having your team build something, when it's time for you to buy something, you want to go buy something, the best advice I can give right now is to invest in things that are cross-functional. In just 3 years' time, since we've been doing this, we have seen more than a handful of clients that have made investments into a vendor, and that vendor is now gone. Because of the speed of transformation that we talked about at the very beginning, there are a lot of vendors that come on stage really quickly, but also come off stage very quickly. There's also just a lot of vaporware that is out there. And so the general recommendation that we have for our clients now is that as you're making an investment, do so, find something that's cross-functional, that serves more than one purpose, so that it ultimately de-risks you from the disruption that's incurring inside of the vendor space right now. You have a lot of vendors that are getting bought out, they're being acquired. The acquisition could be to merge them with another technology, or simply just to kind of stifle the competition that they may be seeing. But there's a lot of disruption in the vendor space. So be really careful in the tools that you're buying, and again, make sure they're cross-functional. Maybe the piece of advice that I wish more people would take me up on is number 3. We have found that once you train people and give people an opportunity to really understand what they're doing, the thing they need next is somewhere to begin learning. They need somewhere where they can start to build something. And what we have found is that they really are asking for a way to begin exploring without risk. So if we go back to one of those original data sets that I pointed out, we know a lot of people are concerned that they're going to mess something up, that they're going to break something, that they're going to do something wrong, that maybe they're going to break a policy, or they're going to copy and paste data in when they shouldn't. All of these things are a risk that is putting friction onto people learning. So the best thing you can do to overcome this friction is to create some type of sandbox with synthetic data that allows your team members to go just try these tools. That we have clients that have put this in place. There are great products out there that do it. A lot of them are very industry specific. But by just deploying some of these sandboxes, all of a sudden they have this place where they know they can't cause trouble. They can't delete something unintentionally. They can't add data in that is private or proprietary, and they shouldn't be putting it in there. So finding one of these tools or even creating an environment for yourself where you can do this is truly an extreme value. Now you can do this in a lot of different ways. You can go out and just even start up a new Office 365 tenant and create synthetic data to put into that environment. Make sure when you create that synthetic data that it actually mimics business data. Don't just go out and download some synthetic data set that's, business data set. Take the time to really sit down and build some synthetic data that mimics what your end users would use. If you can do the first lessons learned of training your employees, and then this third one of giving them a place to go learn, explore, and just basically iterate, that team will come back to you with value. We have seen it in more than a handful of instances at this point where this alone produces more value than any SaaS product that they've purchased, any custom tool that they've had built, that just putting the right business SMEs in a sandbox, teaching them how to leverage these tools and telling them to go iterate produces pretty extreme value. This is something that you have to kind of encourage and get people thinking about. But again, super low hanging fruit. Along the same lines, this idea of risk. Yeah, Fred, go ahead.
Thanks, Chris. I'm curious from what you've seen from others, creating a sandbox and giving them the power, if you will, to build their data sets for exploratory purposes and educational purposes, to me seems like a twofold situation where, one, you've got an individual who is taking a ton of time to want to build this, but yet they've got a full-time job they're trying to figure out. So the amount of time they can dedicate to it could be 5 minutes, could be 5 hours a week. How have you seen others leverage this to where it's been successful in a shorter amount of time? Because I could see this being time sprawling where we're 6 months down the road and we've got a data set of 1,000 words, and it's not going to be very progressive for them.
Yeah, it's a great question, Fred. So if I could summarize what I think you said, you put someone in this situation and they can just kind of sprawl and maybe, they're not focused on the tasks that they should be focused on, but instead all of a sudden they're playing in a sandbox. This is certainly a risk. What we have found is that the concern for that has been minimized as people get in there. People effectively what happens, I don't know of a better way of saying it, but they almost get addicted to playing with these tools. And maybe some of you have experienced this, where if you've gone out and tried a progressive tool and you see the immense value that you can get out of it, all of a sudden you're focused on it. And that produces, Fred, what you're talking about. But what it also produces is we get people start using these tools outside of work. And in fact, one of the things that we commonly recommend is providing employees, especially these kind of SMEs, allowing them to expense, Claude or whatever personal tool that you want them to use, have them expense it back to the business and allow them to use it in their personal life so that they're iterating and learning in that process. And I have found that yes, there are some people that get into the sandbox and kind of just spin their wheels and nothing ever happens. But the large majority of them actually spend very little time spinning wheels and very quickly get traction, which then applies back in. And as soon as they can apply that traction, then we're not talking about basically taking more time. We're talking about adding more time in the day because they're reducing the amount of time that they spend on some of these tedious tasks. Does that make sense, Fred?
Yeah, helpful for sure. And I guess it's one of those, just like anything else that comes out new, you've got to monitor the progression of the employees, but at the same time ensure they can get their job done. So, yeah, I like the idea of the expensing for the personal side growth. I could see that being very advantageous.
Yeah, I mean it's basically you know, you're going to spend $20 for them to spend a couple hours a week learning about AI. And that's really, you know, what you're trying to do. And they're going to do that on their own time. So, yeah. Matt, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I haven't heard a lot about security, and I don't necessarily want to say security and how we usually think of AI security, and don't put sensitive data in free tools, watch for deep fakes. I think that's a utility layer. I'm talking more about AI specific risks of explainability, transparency, and logic. Trust in output, those types of security risks, meaning I see a lot of black box thinking once people start using these tools, in that they'll just trust, hey, AI said this and is a system that we've adopted as a company, so therefore I'm going to trust the output every time, without sufficient logic mapping, or let's say it's for something as simple as a test case. Say you come up with a great solution, you've iterated on it, you've been in a sandbox, and now, like it or not, there's going to be an automation bias there. People just automatically are going to go to the where the water has been. They're going to follow that channel because it's the least resistance. So therefore, they're going to start trusting that loop. At what point do we say, okay, we need to approach everything with an idea of testability and logic tracing? Meaning, if I have this output, can I take my 5 best golden samples, run the same test through AI, and then compare them against that? So I haven't heard you talk a lot about those testing loops or that verification, explainability, transparency. How are you building that into this process?
Yeah, great question, Matt. And the reality that entire topic is many of these hours kind of, you know, laced in together. And there is a lot there. What I will say is what we have seen in the natural progression, the importance of helping team members understand AI beyond the tool, helping them understand, you know, not technically what's going on, but logistically and, you know, from a just a process perspective, this is how these tools work. It opens their eyes to those risks and those problems so that everyone understands them. You know, I think where we're gonna go ahead.
But yeah, that's kind of counter to what I've been experiencing. I think the more they get with these tools, they tend to care less about how it's happening and it's more about the output. That I think it comes down to governance, and that's maybe the area that we're not
I have a
focused
great
on. Yeah.
Matt, if you want to reach out to me after this, I have a great governance model that we suggest, and I can kind of send it to you, where it's you know, model model evaluation and, you know, kind of the whole governance of vendors and asking the right questions and all those pieces. And happy to kind of forward that on to you. There is a whole lot of formality there, and that is about structure. I will say that you're right. When you just teach someone about the tool and you say, okay, hey, this is ChatGPT, go use it. They do go out and they start using it. They find value, and all of the research suggests that the more they just use the tool, the less they basically worry about hallucinations because the majority of the time they're seeing good outputs or they're not seeing the hallucinations. So you're right. But where I would maybe suggest we need to shift is that is we are giving that foundational understanding to the business users, to those people that are just used to using the tool. It's been our experience that they do start to understand that, okay, this, you know, this is math, and math statistically and from a probability standpoint, this is going to happen. Therefore, we have to be involved. And we teach an 80-20 rule. That's what we suggest down to the end user, that the humans should be involved 20% of the time. I think over time that's going to shrink, but still at this point, that needs to be there. But if you want to reach out, I'm happy to provide this large kind of governance thing that we have, and maybe it's a help for you in trying to implement some of that governance stuff. But to Matt's point, there is a large literacy gap that we all have to kind of deal with, and it should roll into the sandbox, the helping people explore and learn. One of the kind of great examples that we like to do inside of the sandbox is helping them understand prompt injections and how that works, and specifically helping them break the system prompts. And as they see how that works, it kind of removes the curtain on how the large language models are working. And as you can break a prompt and then see kind of a native output from a language model, you can start to be a little more transparent about where some of these risks are. To be completely honest, I think the whole literacy gap is something that the industry as a whole is really struggling to solve. We have all spent more than a decade trying to help people understand what not to click in an email. And now all of a sudden, we talked about it. 2 months, we had 100 million people using ChatGPT, and there hasn't been any time to really talk about this gap and how we address it with our end users, is the security that they need to be mindful of. So this needs to be a very aggressive training and employment education, in the same way that we handle all the email phishing type of stuff. Same types of tactics, but just much more aggressive because the time scale is now reduced. Lesson number 4. It's very, very common for clients to go deploy these tools, find value, or think they have value, but then realize that the cost of the model outweighs the value that's been returned. And there's a lot that goes into this. There's a lot of reasons this can happen. So what we suggest is that you just make sure that this is a topic of conversation at the very beginning, that everyone, as you're training and teaching the business SMEs on how to leverage these tools, part of that training needs to be helping them understand the economic values that are involved, how these costs are consumed, tokens, the cost of tokens, what a token looks like. One prompt is very different from another when it comes to token cost. And so spending some time helping your end users understand the economics of AI is really important. And then having an opportunity for you as a business to be mindful of the costs that you're incurring. And really here, it's just, this is important. Make sure you know it up front and don't be caught later on trying to figure it out at the end. This is important. And then the last piece, everyone wants to get to kind of the big flashy stuff. Once you've figured out those back office automations, once you've kind of figured out where that low-hanging fruit is, that's when we circle back to the idea of Disney tracking us through the park. All of us have very unique data in our business. The unique data is the unique opportunity. Someone asked a question about predictive modeling and looking at AI outside of generative AI. The unique opportunities that we see, that we've helped clients with, are very rarely a Gen AI solution. They are much more typically a predictive solution. Now, you could argue that Gen AI is predictive, but you know what I mean. And by looking at the unique data that you have, hopefully you've taken some time to clean it, you're going to identify these unique opportunities that you have to produce predictions based on all of those things. But I would suggest that you don't get into this until you've kind of mastered some of those early lessons learned first. When we're talking about this in the time of a time scale of some sort, we're typically suggesting that people look in the first 12 to 18 months of really focusing on back office, and 18 months and beyond is when we really don't even, we want to start thinking about unique opportunities at some point beyond that. So I wouldn't suggest jumping into this right away, but you want to build that foundation so that as you get to the point, you can really capitalize. Because when we go back to that original fact that Thiago shared with us, if you want to be a part of the 10% that's getting that significant value, it's coming from these unique opportunities. So you've got to build the foundation, prepare your data, get the business ready, and then you can begin capitalizing on these things. The businesses that we have seen that try to jump directly into these, they may find the unique data and they may even understand how to solve the problem, but they're not having success in building and having these tools adopted. So we think that you kind of have to flip the whole model on its end, like we've suggested here, and just start with the foundation and work up. With that, I'm going to take a sip of water here because I'm going to lose my voice at the end of the week. And are there any questions? Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone's time. Here's my email, and feel free to reach out to me if you've got any questions. Matt, if you want to send an email, I'm happy to send over some of those governance frameworks that we suggest, and I hope that those help and work for you.
Perfect. Any final questions?
Good job. That was awesome.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks.